Students, today we discuss about development experience. Under this topic, we discuss about a state of Indian economy on the eve of independence. So, first we shall understand what was the scenario during British government. India had an independent economy before the advent of the British rule, though agriculture was the main source of livelihood for most people, yet the country's economy was characterized by various kinds of manufacturing activities. India was particularly well known for its handicrafts industries in the field of cotton and silk textile, metal and precious stoneworks, etc. These products enjoyed a worldwide market based on the reputation of the fine quality of material used and the high standard of craftsmanship seen in all imports from India. Colonial government followed the policies of protection and promotion of the economic interest of their home country than developing the Indian economy. These policies transferred the country into a supplier of raw material and a consumer of finishing industrial product from Britain. The colonial government never made by sincere attempt to estimate India's national income and per capita income. There were some individual attempts which were made to measure the above aggregates. Dadabhai Nauroji, William Digby, Hindley Siraj, V.K.R.V. Rao, and R.C. Desai were among the notable estimators. Dear student, do you know what what was the full form of V.K.R.V. Rao? The V.K.R.V. Rao full form name is Vijendra Kasturi Ranga Varadaraj Rao. He was eminent economist, politician and educator from Tamil Nadu. And R.C. Desai, the full name is Ramesh Chand Desai. Most studies reflected that the country's growth of aggregate real output during the first half of the 20th century was less than 2% coupled with a meager half percent growth in the per capita output per year. Now we shall understand better manner uh, during British government Indian economies are different sectors: agriculture, industry, foreign trade, demographic transition, occupational structure, infrastructure. Agriculture sector. Now we shall study about agriculture sector. Causes of stagnation and backwardness of Indian agriculture. The first point is land revenue system. There were various systems of land settlement introduced by the colonial government. Jamidari system implemented by the Bengal presidency was the Netherland settlement. Do we know who introduced permanent settlement in India during British government? Lord Cornwallis was introduced permanent settlement in 1793. The profit occurring out of the agriculture sector went to the jamidars instead of cultivator. The main interest of the jamidars was only to collect rent regardless of economic condition of the cultivators. The dates for depositing a specified sum of revenue were fixed, following which the jamidar were to lose their rights. The jamidars were free to extract as much revenue from the tillers of the soil as they could. To do this, they would raise amount of land revenue. Second point is commercialization of agriculture. Due to commercialization of agriculture, there was some evidence of higher yield of cash crops in some parts of the country. Yet, this failed to improve economic conditions of the farmers because instead of producing food crops, now they were producing cash crops which were to ultimately used by British industries for their home country. Also, the farmers were given cash advances to cultivate cash crops, particularly indigo. They were forced to grow cash crops since they had no other source of subsistence. They would grow cash crops. Third point is impact of partition on agriculture. India's agriculture was highly adversely affected by partition and the time of independence. Partition caused a drastic fall in agriculture production as a large amount of fertile land went to Pakistan. It caused food crisis. It affected adversely India's jute production and there was loss of huge raw materials stock of jute. India had monopoly control over jute production before the partition. Fourth point is low investment in agriculture. India's agriculture was stripped of investment in threshing, flood control, drainage, and desalination of soil as the Britishers spent very little on technological improvements. Some farmers changed their cropping pattern from food crops to commercial crops. Still, a large number of tenants, small farmers, and sharecroppers neither had resource and technology nor had incentive to invest in agriculture. Now we shall discuss about industrial sector of eve of independence. India could not develop a sound industrial base under the colonial rule. This sector needed modernization, diversification, and increased investment. The policy British government followed was the policy of systematic deindustrialization. It was a twofold policy. It implied two things. First is to reduce India to the status of mere exporter of import and raw materials for the upcoming modern industries in Britain and to turn India into a sprawling market for the finishing products of British industries to receive maximum benefit for Britain. And state of industrial sector in the independence can be understand by the following feature. Decay of handicrafts. Decay of handicrafts are following regions. First is introduction of discriminatory tariff policy. This policies allowed free export of raw materials from India and free import of British made goods to India. Indian handicrafts were discouraged by imposing heavy duty on their export. It led to decline of handicrafts both in domestic as well as in international market. On one hand, and easy entrance of British-made goods in India on the other. Second point is low-priced machine-made goods. Machine-made goods from Britain were low-priced, which gave competition to Indian handicrafts, which were comparatively costlier. Competition from Britain-made goods declined the demand of handicrafts in India. And third point is changes in tastes and preference due to impact of British culture. Tastes and preference of people were shifting in favor of British product, which led to increase in demand of British products. This led to fail in demand for Indian made goods, which were mostly based on Indian handicrafts. The fourth point is fall in encouragement to Indian handicrafts. Before the British rule, Indian handicrafts were supported by the Indian emperors, princes, Nawab, etc., which had given on handicrafts domestic and international recognition. Because of British rule, these patrons were losing their existence, and accordingly India handicrafts too were losing the state patronage. Now we shall discuss about slow growth of modern industry. It is clear from the following points that industrial sector was progressing, but it was not at the desired level. First point is lopsided growth of industries. Lopsided means one-sided. During the second half of the 19th century, modern industry began to take root in India, but its progress remained very slow. Initially, this development was confined to the setting of cotton and jute, textile mills, and coal mines. First textile mill was set up in Mumbai 1854 and jute mill set up in West Bengal. Subsequently, the iron and steel industries began coming up in the beginning of the 20th century. The Tata Iron Steel Company TISCO was incorporated in 1907, and few industries in the field of sugar, cement, paper, etc. came up after the Second World War, but their growth rate was very slow. The second point is lack of capital good industries. There were hardly any capital goods industry like machine, industrial plants, equipments, etc. to promote further industrialization in India, because Britishers wanted Indians to depend on Britain for capital goods. Capital goods industries which could produce machine tools to produce goods further for consumption or production were required for industrialization. Due to lack of capital goods industries, industrialization in India could not prosper as per the requirement of the development of the country. The third point is lower contribution to GDP. Growth rate of new industrial sector and its contribution to the gross domestic product had been very small. It is because the industrial sector was not progressing at the overall desired rate. Level of overall production and income generation remained very low. And fourth point is limited area of operation of the public sector. The public sector remained confined to the railways, power generation, communication, ports, and some other department undertaking, only which was not adequate. Participation of government did not extend to development of those industries which were strategic for its growth, like capital goods, electronics, machine and equipments, etc. Now, dear students, we shall discuss about foreign trade on the eve of independence. India has been important trading nation since ancient time, but the restrictive policies of commodity production, trade and tariff pursued by the colonial government adversely affected the structure, composition and volume of India's foreign trade. So, state of India's foreign trade during the British rule is given as under. First point is a status of India as an exporter of raw material and importer of finishing goods. Under this point, India became an exporter of primary products such as raw silk, cotton, wool, sugar, jute, etc. and remained an importer of finishing consumer goods like cotton, silk, woolen cloths and capital goods produced in Britain. The composition of export and imports of Indian economy made it backward and stagnant. And second point is monopoly control. Britain maintained monopoly control over India's export and imports. As a result, more than half of the India's foreign trade was restricted to Britain, and the rest was with countries like China, Ceylon, now known as Sri Lanka, Persia, now known as Iran. The opening of Suez Canal also intensified British control over India's foreign trade, and it provided a direct route for trade between India and Britain. The third point is misuse of export surplus. India's foreign trade generated huge export surplus, but the surplus came at a huge cost to the country's economy as it led to drain of Indian wealth. Several essential commodities, food, grains, clothes, grocery, etc., were scarcely available in the domestic market as these were exported. This surplus was used to make payment for the expenditure incurred by an office set up by the colonial government in Britain and also to fight war fought by the British government. Now we shall discuss about demographic condition during the British rule. The demographic conditions during the British rule suggested all the picture of a backward economy. Various details about the population were first collected through census in 1881. It revealed unevenness in India's population growth. From 1881, census operations were conducted after every 10 years. Before 1921, India was in first stage of demographic transition. The second stage started after 1921. The year 1921 is described as the year of Great Divide. It is because after 1921, population grew continuously and rapidly. The demographic condition during the British rule are discussed as under. First point is high birth rate and high death rate. Birth rate, it refers to number of children born per 1000 in a year was nearly 48 per thousand. Death rate, it refers to number of persons dying per thousand in a year was nearly 40 per thousand. Both these rates were high, indicating poor health care and backwardness of a country, which led to massive poverty in the country. Third, third point is literacy. Second point is infant mortality rate. It refers to number of infant dying before 1 year of age per thousand live births in a year. It was about 218 per thousand compared to present infant mortality rate of 57% per thousand. Higher rate of Indian mortality rate was indicator of poor state of health care of the country. Third point is literacy rate. It refers to number of persons capable to read and write above 7 years of age. The overall literacy level was less than 16%. Out of this, female literacy level was very low. It was just 7%. Low level of literacy rate was an indicator of social backwardness of the society. And fourth point is life expectancy, means how much year alive during British period. It refers the average life of persons, average number of years for which a person is expected to live. It was also very low. It was 32 years in contrast to the present 68 years. It indicated poor healthcare facilities and lack of general awareness to keep healthy. And fifth point is poor state of health facilities. Public health facilities were either unavailable or were inadequate when available. British rule spent very little on health care facilities. Water and airborne diseases were rampant and proved fatal for human life. And sixth point is widespread poverty. Extensive poverty prevailed in India during the colonial period. It was due to lack of education, poor health service, and discriminatory policy of British government. GDP and per capita income of the country were very low, which led to widespread poverty in the country. Next, we shall discuss about occupational structure through table. During the colonial period, the occupational structure of India, the distribution of working person across different industries and sectors showed little sign of change. The state of occupational structure can be given as under. The primary sector 72.7%, agriculture 50%, and forestry, fisheries, animal husbandry, plantation and mining 3%. Secondary sector 10.1. Under secondary sector, a small and large scale industries 9.1%. Building construction 1.1%. And tertiary sector 17.2. Under secondary tertiary sector, trade and commerce 5.2%. Transport, storage and communication 1.4%. And other invisible item 10.6%. Combine of three sector is total 100%. The above data have been derived from Census of India 2001. Data of the year 1947 are not available. It is clear from the above table that in 1951 nearly 72.7% of working population was absorbed in agriculture sector. It was predominance of agriculture over secondary sector and tertiary sector, which had merely 10.1% and 17.2% employment respectively. And regional variation. Through agriculture sector was the major sector in terms of share of workforce absorbed in it, still there was regional variation. Parts of then Madras Presidency, state of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Bombay and Bengal witnessed a decline in the workforce in agriculture sector and showed increase in workforce of manufacturing and service sector. Now we shall discuss about infrastructure during the British rule. Under the colonial rule, basic infrastructure such as railways, port, water, transport, post and telegraph developed, but this development was to serve the colonial interest. The state of infrastructure during the British rule can be given as: first is roads. Roads constructed in India during the British rule were built primarily for the purpose of mobilizing the army within India and drawing out raw material from the countryside to the nearest railway station or the port to send them to other countries, there was not much progress in the construction of roads. There was always an acute shortage of all weather roads to reach out to rural areas during the rainy season, due to which people living in these areas suffered badly during natural calamities and famines. Second point, railways. The British introduced the railway in India in 1850. It was an important contribution by the British in India. The railways affected the structure of the Indian economy in two important ways. It enabled people to travel long distance and break geographical and cultural barriers, and it fostered commercialization of Indian agriculture, which adversely affected the comparative self-sufficiency of village economies in India. The benefit was Indian people gained owing to introduction of the railways were, were outweighed by the country's huge economic loss on account of drain Indian wealth to Britain during the British rule. India had become exporter of primary product and importer of finishing consumer product. Third is air and water transport. The colonial dispensation also took measures for the developing the inland trade and sea lanes. These were developed to the enhance infrastructure, yet these measures were far from satisfactory. And fourth is communication. British rule in India developed the modern system of communication. Post telegraphs were the most popular and widely used means of communication. The introduction of expensive system of electronic telegraph in India was to maintain law and order in the country. The postal service, despite having wide utility and improved administrative efficiency, still remained inadequate for the domestic growth. The first stamp was released in 1852 and the first telegraph line was started in 1853. Now we discuss about positive impact of British rule in India. Though British rule in India was in a way colonial exploitation of the Indian economy, however, in the process of exploiting India, some of the ways or means adopted by the British government proved positive for India. Some of the positive effects of British rule in India are: first is commercialization of agriculture. Encouragement of commercialized agriculture proved boon for India, as it implied a good breakthrough in agriculture. It showed the way to be self-sufficient by selling the surplus produce. Second is development of infrastructure. Development of roads, railways, air and water transport could check overall adequacy of goods and services. Development of post and telegraph opened by open up new opportunities of growth and improved administrative efficiency. And the system of electric telegraph served the purpose of maintaining law and order. Third point is check on famines. Developed means of transport and communication help in regulation of food supply and medical help during famines or any other natural calamities. Development of roads and railways initiated economic development. Transportation and communication were a great support in emergencies. Monetary system of exchange. British rule helped Indian economy to shift from barter commodity for commodity exchange system to monetary system of exchange. People learned to understand the use of money as a unit of value and a store of value. And fifth point is effective administration. The British government followed an effective and efficient administrative setup which left a legacy of effective work culture for people of India. This served as a ready reckoner for out policy planners and politicians. Assignment for students. First, multiple choices. When did permanent settlement system introduced in India? The first multiple choice 1790, B 1791, C 1792, D 1793. The correct answer is 1793. Second question, dear students, which were the most affected crops during the partition of India? A. Rice and wheat, B. Wheat and maize, C. Jute and cotton, D. Rice and gram. The correct answer is jute and cotton. Question third, which of the following region was not related to the decay of handicrafts? A. Low priced machine made goods, B. Changes in tastes and preference, C. Discriminatory tariff policy, D. Lack of means of irrigation. The correct answer is lack of means of irrigation. Or this question for homework. First question is, when did Bengal famine took place? Second question, when did the first cotton mill start in India? Mention the state of Indian handicraft under British rule. Fourth question, state the twofold motive behind the deindustrialization by the colonial government in India. Fifth question, name some notable economists who estimated India's per capita income during the colonial period. Thank you.